Hello YouTube and welcome back to Assetto Corsa. Today we're going to be driving the McLaren M23 mod and we're going to be driving it at Spa-Francorchamps, and we'll see if this can hold a candle to Assetto Corsa's very own Ferrari 312T.
Right then, so while we're getting started, this was one half of the famous Battle in Rush, wasn't it?
Yep. We are driving James Hunts car.
Yeah, James Hunt's car, yeah, just to clarify, this is James and not Nicky Lauda's Ferrari 3112.
Yep.
3112? 312.
312T, which is the one that was actually available as in Assetto Corsa as one of their what can we call it, in-house cars, not one of the mods. So it's this mod actually is very welcome, because it gives a lot of people a chance to take two Formula 1 cars from the 1970s. I believe both versions are 1973. It gives them a chance to actually take them against each other, especially in multiplayer, because I think I can see a lot of lobbies doing this.
Right, so shall we talk about the specs of this car then? So it features a Ford Cosworth 3-litre V8 engine, naturally aspirated, and it's a mid-mounted engine, obvious, that's why it looks like a co-car.
Yeah. And it weighs in at 575 kg. It's not a very heavy car.
It's a very light car.
Yeah. I think it's pretty much the same weight as Nicky Lauda's car.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, first of all, we forgot to mention who actually made this car, and it's made by, is it OMV?
OMV. Unfortunately, their full name is quite difficult to pronounce, but it's the OMV group, and they've worked very hard on the physics, they've worked very hard on the sounds and textures. We do know that the sound is by
El Mariachi.
Yep, and we do know that the time it took to make this car, 5 months. So that just shows the amount of hard work and dedication that goes into making something like this. Yeah. And honestly, it shows.
Yeah.
It honestly shows.
Just by the little things, like the gloves.
Yeah. The gloves, and not just that, just the sort of, should we say, it's the fidelity.
Yeah.
The fidelity of the actual...
That's actually a nice word. That's actually a nice word, yeah. I'll give you that.
It's really well built, and you know what I really liked about this car, even before I jumped into the cockpit? When I went to install it, I didn't have to drag and drop any files. I just double-clicked an installer and told it where the Assetto Corsa location was.
That's really neat, isn't it?
I think that's a really neat touch. Makes installation incredibly easy. And for those who like to drive new cars and race new cars, but don't want to start dragging and dropping things into their Assetto Corsa folder because of, maybe they're not comfortable with it, they're worried they might break something. An installer does all of that for you, and it's perfect.
Yeah, it's very simple start, so I think that's got to be said.
So I took this lap a little bit easy, but from here on in, I sort of start putting my foot down more on these laps. So we'll see what happens on that. Other thing to mention is that even though this car did come with a 6-speed gearbox later on in the decade, so I think it's 1975. This one is from 1973, like I mentioned. Therefore, it only has a 5-speed gearbox. I'm about to make this discovery as I go at the top of a Rouge.
Yeah, and also, even when it did have a 6-speed gearbox, it still came second to none other than the Nicky Lauda.
Yeah. I mean, that 312T chassis was pretty good. And honestly, I think we can now compare them because they're both in Assetto Corsa, and I think we've got a good comparison for these. What should we start with though?
So did this car actually win any Grand Prix or anything? Was it?
Yes, yeah. It won a few Grand Prix. If it didn't win any Grand Prix, believe me, it wouldn't have come second.
Yeah.
I think James Hunt won a few races. Emerson Fittipaldi won the British Grand Prix in this car. Yeah. So for all of us, obviously we're British, so we should know the history of our Grand Prix. So they won that, and it's a McLaren, so it's very well loved in Britain. It's one of those cars that, it's 100% British in a sense. You know that there's no, unlike, for example, take TVR for example, or Jaguar, they've got a lot of external influences. Yeah. These cars were 100% British. Yeah, albeit, Bruce McLaren was from New Zealand, I believe.
But wasn't he a racer as well?
Yes, Bruce McLaren was a racer, and that's how it started.
Yeah, was it 1960s?
1950s and 60s. Yep. That's exactly how these cars started. Bruce McLaren came along, decided to try and race some cars, and then decided, well, how about I make my own team, and teamed up with Ford. Oh. And that's why we've got the Cosworth engine in this. Of course, later years, McLaren switched to Honda. Then they switched to Mercedes, and now, as of actually when this video is coming out, so it's coming out on a Sunday. as of the day after that, McLaren have an official McLaren Honda again.
Okay.
So their Formula 1 cars have gone back to McLaren Honda with not Emerson Fittipaldi and James Hunt, but Fernando Alonso and Jenson Button. So that's going to be one hell of an experienced team. But enough about the history of McLaren as I understeer. That's one thing that this car did do. It did understeer around fast corners. I think we can talk about the mod and how we felt this mod was made.
One thing I would like to comment is I found it while I was watching you drive this car is I found you driving this car much more easier than the Ferrari. I felt rather Ferrari. I felt like you were tugging about the steering wheel, changing gears. You were not struggling. You were working at it. Now this one, it felt simpler. If you get what I mean.
Yeah, I think I agree. What we're looking at here was the Ferrari had a tendency to oversteer, and oddly enough, that's actually a trait of Ferrari Formula 1 cars throughout history. Even all the cars through the 70s, 80s, 90s, the noughties, and now, this decade.
The noughties.
Well, that's what they're called. That's what they're called. And I don't know, we can't even call these the 10s. So I'm just going to go this decade.
Yeah.
They all have a tendency to oversteer. This car did not have that similar tendency. That being said, I don't know whether I'd prefer the oversteer, because as a driver, I mean, okay, you just saw there's a little bit of lift-off oversteer, and there.
Yeah.
So there is oversteer from that era, but it's not as much as the Ferrari, like you said, making the car easier to drive. The car as well, aerodynamically, felt that it was a bit more planted.
Yeah.
But that being said, I don't think it handled the corners as well as the Ferrari did. The Ferrari was faster in the corners, and I think that's why Niki Lauda kept winning.
One thing I want to mention is, do you remember the Ferrari 312T? I mean, I was just looking at the look of the car itself, and how the back wheels stick out so wide compared to the front.
So we'll be jumping in and out of replays. So what he's talking about here, you're about to see.
Yeah. So I was just wondering, was this 312 like was like that as well?
Yep. It was exact. It was features of those cars. I think it started in the 1960s with the Lotus and the Lotus 49. It had small front wheels, which were thin, much thinner than these ones here, which you can see, and it had very fat rear wheels, because the power, obviously being a rear wheel drive, all the power was going onto these wheels. You wanted to have as much traction and grip on the road as you could, but you didn't want the car to bog down at all with the front wheels gripping too much. You had to have that fine balance. It's very difficult to get that fine balance in Formula 1 cars. In fact, now they've changed them, where the wheels are almost identical in size. There are still very slight differences, but they're almost identical in size, and the tyres are exactly the same. Unlike this, which looks like a hot rod.
Hot rod.
Yeah. I mean, with F1 cars of that era, there's still a bit of menace about them, isn't there?
Yeah.
You can't trust them 100% when you're going around a corner.
No, you can't.
You just don't know.
I mean, the other thing is this one was a V8, while the Ferrari 312T was a V6. So you had that. Sorry, it wasn't a V6. It was a V12 flat 12. It was a flat 12. It was one of those weird
flat 12.
Yeah, it was incredibly odd. You don't get those kind of transmissions.
Sounds weird, yeah.
You don't get those kind of transmissions. It was a boxer engine, basically. While this was a V8 engine, which meant that the back of the car was shaped differently. Now, that, I think, the Ferrari had the power on this car, easily.
Yeah.
This car just had that ease to drive, and I'm fishtailing, and at this point, I have to admit, I took my hands off the steering wheel and actually crossed them, because that's what you're meant to do if you're heading into a wall. So for any of you who like track day cars and things like that, if you're heading to a wall, and I don't recommend it, I really don't recommend doing that. If you're heading straight towards a wall,
leg of the wheel.
I don't recommend heading towards the wall in the first place. But if you are heading towards a wall, let go of the wheel, cross your hands. It's the safest way.
It's like, I'm ready to die.
No, it's not like cross your heart and prepare to die.
No, I think you've heard it wrong.
Yeah, just cross your hands and just think like Lewis Hamilton does. This is gonna hurt, right? But anyway, going off topic there. Coming back to this car, the sound was made really, really well. What El Mariachi, I think him and Never Crash make some of the best sounds for Assetto Corsa. So you can tell it's a V8. You really can.
We've featured quite a lot of their sounds, haven't we? Most of the cars have this.
Most of the cars that we have either have sounds by El Mariachi or Never Crash. the NSX. We're talking about. We're looking at the Mazda 787B. This car. Remember, Never Crash did that V10 engine for the Formula One. The Formula One. We did that some episodes ago. That was a fantastic sound. I'm waiting for that to be compatible with F-Mod.
Have you done the review of the Zonda?
Yeah, the Zonda's Assetto Corsa's own, very own.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how about the T12T?
We did that in a very special episode where we compared loads and loads of Formula One cars. I think I've got maybe another lap after this that I'm going to do. So in that lap, I think we're going to talk about the physics. Let's talk about how this car felt. It feels like a Formula One car.
Well, I haven't driven this car, so you're the only person driver here, so we'll ask you the questions. How did it feel? Did it feel like a go-kart or...?
It does feel like a go-kart because when, for example, there's something called power oversteer. And in a car like this, or in many old cars, you can feel power oversteer a lot. Now, if you come into a corner and then suddenly put your foot down, it doesn't matter how fat your back wheels are, that back end is going to step out. And that was something that you felt in this car a lot. And if you look at old Formula One videos, that's something you saw a lot of. You didn't see Formula One cars sticking to the road at all times. You saw the back sliding out of every corner because of this this very same phenomenon, this power oversteer. And it did that, and this car did the exact same.
Alright then, this or the Ferrari?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
Into it.
That's a tough one because I like the sound of this car more than I like the sound of the Ferrari.
Which was a
flat 12.
Flat 12, yeah.
Even though the more cylinders the better for me. In fact, to be honest, my preference is the V10. But V12, V10, flat 12, generally you'd think that I would go for the higher cylinders. To be honest, I like the sound of this V8 more than the sound of the Ferrari. But in terms of driving, I think I like the Ferrari more than this.
Because of its chassis.
The chassis is better, it feels better. Not to knock this, and not to knock the modders who made this, because this is absolutely fantastic. Just as a personal preference. However, I'm not going to ever own any of these cars. So in terms of driving, I think I would drive these two equally. They're both fun, they both present similar challenges, but there's enough differences in them that it'll give you hours and hours of fun just trying to get it right and get both cars correct.
I mean, it makes sense. They've got their own individual character, haven't they?
Yeah. It's sort of you'd put it down to maybe perhaps they're like two brothers. They're the same but they're different. Yeah. That's what they're like, and that is because of the era that they were in, 1973 to 1970s, and the fact that they were made by two rivals who, in Formula One, they are the biggest rivals of all time.
Yeah.
Ferrari and McLaren. So, that being said, I think that brings us to the end of this video. We're just going to leave the end of this lap on. Thank you very much for watching, and you'll see, I think I should get a good time on this. Please hit the subscribe button to subscribe to our channel. Leave a comment in the comments box below. Again, hit the like button on this video, and we'll see you in the next episode of Assetto Corsa, where I think we'll review another track. Thank you very much for watching. We're AD Studios.